Hi, welcome to Truth and Reality. I am Ashley, and I'm so glad that you're here. This podcast is dedicated to just that, talking about the reality of life, the ups, the downs, the in betweens, and how truth, our faith, and God comes into all those spaces. So let's get started. We're talking more on identity today, and my friend Melissa is with us. Hey, Melissa.
Hey, Ash, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Do you have coffee this morning or this morning? It's afternoon. Do you have coffee this afternoon?
I have tea. What about you?
I do too. I have tea. That's a
We didn't
first.
even plan that. We did not even plan that.
Okay.
I have caffeinated a lot today, so I think I need to ease in and just work on tea for a little bit. So
Same, same.
I love that we're talking on identity today. And Ash, I think I have been able and had the pleasure and honor of just watching you walk through really something really, really hard in the last, 3 to 4 years and see you really blossom and become this beautiful woman, if I can compliment you at all, and
Thank
just
you.
friend and mother. And you walk through a lot of heartache and pain, but I've seen you really blossom into this beautiful person. And I really want to start out by just having you talk about, you know, um, identity and what you view identity is, and what did you struggle with maybe through those hard times, if you're going to be vulnerable with us and just talk with us, just for the viewers and the people listening. And what did that look like, and what were the challenges, and what have you gained and learned from since then?
Yeah. Yeah. So my identity really was wrapped up, and we spoke about identity the last two podcasts as well, but it was really wrapped up in my roles, positions, and relationships. I was in patterns and cycles of codependency. And if you don't know what codependency is, it's really relying on other people to name you and give you value, or your roles as wife or as mom or as teacher or whatever role you have. And so I grew up really valuing what other people said about me. I had this misplaced perspective on humility. I really didn't want to be prideful. So then I hated myself. So then I had to work and please to get other people to name me. And that was okay. And that's how I did that. But that's codependency. And
Yeah.
so that's super unhealthy, right? And yeah, I didn't know that I was in that. So then when there was betrayal in my marriage and my marriage shattered and eventually ended in divorce, but through that process, we tried to work on our marriage for a few years. And what it really did was, although that was a costly thing we went through, it really revealed what was already hiding underneath the surface for me, which was misplaced identity and codependency, which was
Yep.
unhealthy to have in a marriage. So that was hard. I mean, when your role stops, right?
Yep.
No longer wife. I am mom still. I wasn't teaching at the time. I was staying home with my kids, and I was a new mom to twins and a 4 year old and 2 year old. I really felt like I didn't know who I was. I didn't know if I had value or not. And honestly, in those dark places, what I really felt was I felt rejected. I felt unwanted, and I felt unloved. I really felt discarded. And even though I had other people in my life and friends and family, my identity was in the hands of my spouse at the time. And so
Yep.
I allowed him basically to be God over me, which was scary in a
Yep.
sense that I was giving him the power to name me. Now, that was not necessarily anything he chose to do. Unfortunately, it's hard to say that I willingly handed that over.
Yep.
Um, because that's the pattern that I was in. And so I took my circumstance and I took the situation that I was in and what was happening in my marriage, and then that ended up naming me. And so that was a really shattering place to sit, if I'm being honest. So,
I can't imagine. I can't. What
yeah.
would you say now are just practical tools if someone was listening, as far as what steps would they need to take if they were walking through a situation similar to yours or maybe similar to mine, right? Grief and loss. And, we do as women, I think we find a lot of identity and a lot of self-worth in our title. I found a lot of
Hmm.
worth in being Matt's wife and John, Julia, and Ben Carson's mom. But
Hmm.
if you were to stand, or if you're standing where you're at now, what would you say are like three key tools that you did just personally that helped you, that could help someone listening?
Yeah, it's a great question. The first thing when you're in that shattered state, right? I'm in the space of not having a job or a career, not having a relationship, being mom to four young kids, which was stressful with multiple two babies at the time, right? You're looking, and I think it's natural in our society and culture to look to things, positions, roles, possessions, even to give us value. and I couldn't grab anything. And I think it was in that place of desperation that I had to really assess and be honest with myself. Where am I finding my value? And how do I move forward? And in that place, like we talked about, I grew up in the church and I grew up
Yep.
learning who God says I am. And it didn't resonate. I felt unloved. I felt unwanted. I felt discarded. And over here, you read and you understand and you read the Bible, and people even tell you, like, hey, you're chosen and you're actually really loved and you're wanted and God loves you and he's with you. And then when you don't feel that way, right? Like
Yep.
there's that dissonance. And so I had to sit and sort through it. And that's the hardest part, right? Sorting through
Yep.
who named me, how I allowed them to name
Yep.
me, where I found my identity, what God actually says about me, or even my family. If you're not a person of faith, and it's like, well, you have family and friends who love you probably in your circle. And so
Yep.
I had to sit and think about, what voices am I listening to? Who am I going to listen to name me? And it got
Yep.
to the place where I was learning about codependency. I was learning about identity, and I felt God speak to my heart and say the way out of codependency is through identity in him, in God.
Yep. Yep.
And it was in that space where I said, okay, then who does God say that I am? And it was all up here because I've
Yep.
grown up in the church. So I wrote it all down. I wrote down who I was in Christ. And then I went and I found it in the Bible, and it's like, okay, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. So how do I believe that? And it was just this slow process. I'd like to say it was really fast, right?
Right.
But it
Right.
was just such a slow process of identifying the lie that I believed about myself and saying, okay, I can identify that's a lie, write it out so we can see it. It's no longer spinning in my head. Now, what
Yep.
does the truth of the word of God say?
Yep.
And then kind of rectifying that difference, saying, okay, God, like, I don't believe this. I know it, and you're saying it. Help me believe it. And over time, like, you could just, over time, it changes. Over time, my mind was being renewed, and I had different experience. I feel like with family, with friends, with prayer, with God, where he showed me and revealed to me how much he loved me. Um, I would read the Bible, and I'm not kidding you, and this was the first time it happened in my life, where it would pop out at me and feel like it was written to me, whether I was reading the Psalms or reading in Isaiah about God having an everlasting love for you. And it became real. And that was the
Yep.
first time for me that I had it pop out and really become real, where God was healing those places in my heart. Um,
Yep.
yeah. So it was amazing in that space, that when God was speaking to me or highlighting verses or just speaking to me and helping me feel peace in those moments, he was there even when I didn't feel loved and I felt
Right.
rejected. This is
Right.
kind of like I feel like I should share this. So it's kind of like a harsh picture, but I literally would picture myself in a dark room, dirty, discarded, and broken.
Mhm.
And in the picture God would give me is he's holding his hand out to me saying, I still want you, even though that's how you feel. And the
Yeah.
beautiful thing is like, that's not how God saw me. That's how I saw
Yep.
myself. And then
Right.
slowly over time, he's helped me change how I see myself based on how he sees me, and show me loving relationships around me too. That was a
Right.
long response to that
No,
question.
that was so beautiful and so honest. And thank you for sharing that. Like I said, I think we all can identify with things and roles, and right, not even realizing that they're bad patterns or things that we have to break the cycle of. I think you and
Yeah.
I have had a lot of conversations just as friends of, our thoughts and the power of our thoughts and where that thought goes. And, even just we're both single parents, right? And so just, keeping in mind who we are and who are we created to be. And we
Hmm.
have the ability to do this, even though it feels hard. And so I appreciate your honesty with that.
Thank you. Yeah. And a lot of things I would say too, we talked about identifying lies. Some lies were just like, I'm not enough. I can't do this. I
Yep.
can't be the mom to four kids by myself. And that was a lie. That was a limiting belief I was believing about myself. And just through understanding, like, God's given me everything I need. He gave me these kids, so he's going to supply what I need for these kids. And some of that is through practical things. Like, I had to learn how to take care of myself. Other
Yep.
things is like, I have to learn it's not all my responsibility, that God's with me and God's going to help and guide me to how to do that. And it was just this learning process of like confronting and standing in front of those lies and actually being willing to look at them, because I sometimes think that's the hardest part, is being vulnerable enough to say, ooh, I believe this about myself. I don't want to say that I do, but I do,
Right.
right?
Right.
And then how do I move past it, because they're all limiting beliefs. And it's so interesting to see over time. I had a lot of lies I believed about myself, but they were core to like 4 or 5 lies. They were just tangents of them, whether
Yep.
I'm not enough or I'm unwanted or I'm unloved, or life will always be hard, things like that.
Hmm.
And it's so interesting to see how, when God has healed those roots of those lies and walked me forward, how he's transformed me. If you knew me, which you did,
Yep.
4 years ago, I was a very different person, very different
Hmm.
in how I believed, how I acted, how I walked out my life, how I interacted in relationships. And God's really just restored that identity based on him, and
Yep.
based on knowing that I'm loved and I'm created purposefully and uniquely, and he's equipped me to do what I need to do. So it's a process. And I'd say the first step, right, is identifying the lie,
Yep.
finding the truth, and then allowing God in those spaces to heal it. Because, right, we can do the practical steps, but God does that healing work inside of us as
He
well.
does. You and I have both seen that. How would you say you view yourself today? If I can ask that question, how do you view
Yeah.
the
Oh,
Ashley today? How would you say that?
yeah.
I'm putting you on the hot seat right now.
I
I
know.
get to
I
ask
was
the
like,
questions today. So,
yeah, that's a good question. I'd say, I'm going to be honest, I sometimes still struggle and have
sure.
thoughts pop up. And so I
Yeah.
need to learn how to grab the thoughts. So I'd say, how do I view myself today? Like, I know that I'm loved, and I know that I'm secure in how God made me. Over the last 5 years, I feel like my relationship with God has just blossomed into this place of peace and of wrapped in love, and this like security, if that makes sense, in knowing who I am and who he's created me to be. And then I think, as that foundation was there, really, of love, that yeah, I just see myself growing and finding new facets of who I am, where I
Yeah.
am more bold, I am more outgoing than I thought. I'm doing things like a podcast, which I never
Right.
thought that I would do. And so I think that God's showing these creative capacities that he's given me, or even personality traits of like wanting to be goofy and having fun, that I'm learning who I am. And so I guess I'm seeing myself new every day as I'm doing different things and growing. But I definitely see myself as being loved now, as being wanted, and in healthy relationships with friends and family and with my kids. I feel a lot stronger than I was. I mean, if I look back at myself 5 years ago, I like want to whisper back to her, like, you're gonna be okay. Like,
Right.
you're gonna get through this, and you're gonna be stronger than where you were. And
Right.
so, yeah, so I feel like, and I just feel like saying, if you're in a situation, whether you
Yeah.
went through a divorce, a loss of some sort, or even if you're just like in a transition of jobs or roles or positions, that like this in between stage can be a gift too. I said early on, like, that shattering of my life, right?
Yeah.
Like, I said early on, nothing good can come from this. And now
Yeah.
5 years later, I'm like, oh wow, I found myself through this
Yep.
shattering. It was
Yep.
costly, it hurt, it was,
Yep.
it was hard to walk through, but I'm really thankful for what God brought out of it. And most
Yep.
importantly, that identity piece and foundation on him.
So good. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. So we are going to also be talking about some self-care, which comes with identity and knowing
Yeah.
who we are and understanding how to care for ourselves in our next episode. And so I just wanted to invite you to join us in the next one. Thank you, Melissa.
Yeah.
And
Thanks so much for having me.
yeah, and thanks so much for asking those tough questions that are unscripted, everybody. So lucky everybody who's listening. So you can find us at Peace Runs Deep on Instagram and Facebook. And we have our website too, where you can find books and our podcast information. There's a photography page now, hey oh, and
Woo.
some other things as we're growing here. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.